Moments ago, South Korea confirmed its president did meet with the North Korean leader just a few hours ago. The discussion held at the DMZ on the north side focused on how to get this sit-down between the U.S. and North Korea back on track. CNN's Will Ripley just returned from North Korea a few hours ago, in fact, and spoke to regime officials there. He's standing by for us. We do want to start with CNN's Matt Rivers, live in Seoul, South Korea.
Matt, what are you learning about the meeting?
Well, this has just come out in the past 30 minutes or so. It came as a huge shock to those of us here in South Korea and, frankly, all around the world. We know that these two leaders met in a surprise visit from 3 to 5 p.m. Local time here in South Korea. That would have been in the wee hours of the morning on the east coast of the United States. And not a ton of detail yet. We're just getting this video in now for the first time, showing those two leaders meeting, greeting each other like old friends at this point. We know they met for the first time back in late April at the first Inter-Korean Summit. Not a ton of details about what they spoke about so far, other than the Blue House here, the Office of the Presidency in South Korea, saying that they spoke about implementing the joint declaration that came out after that first meeting in late April. But the more important point would be that they spoke about the potential U.S.-North Korea summit. Now, we didn't get any more details than that. We are expecting to get some more details throughout the night tonight here in South Korea, and then we're expecting a press release from the Office of the Presidency here in South Korea at 10 a.m. local time tomorrow morning, 9 p.m. Saturday evening in the United States on the East Coast. But this is truly a remarkable moment, completely unexpected, especially when you consider how disappointed people here in South Korea were. President Moon Jae-in, more than any other leader, had really set the stage for the potential summit between the United States and North Korea. He really laid the groundwork there with that first Inter-Korean Summit. But what we see with this meeting is that despite the fact that they were incredibly disappointed that the summit had been canceled by the Americans, they did not sit around and feel sorry for themselves. Clearly, they're engaging in proactive diplomacy here, trying to make sure, do their part to make sure this summit can get rescheduled at some other point.
All right, Matt, thank you.
So, Will, I know you just returned from North Korea, and you spoke to government officials. What are you hearing about this regime, and is this a sign that they could seriously get this back on the books?
I think it's a very encouraging sign that the summit could happen in Singapore on June 12th as planned, or potentially at a later date or a different location. Look, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has kept up a very busy schedule. Just yesterday, he was in the same city, Wonsan, that we were. He was inspecting a construction site there right next to our hotel. We didn't get to see him because his security people wouldn't let us look out the windows, but we were kind of locked down for 3 hours while he was there. And then to find out that just a matter of hours ago, he went back to the demilitarized zone. And it's significant, too, that the South Korean president crossed over the military demarcation line into the northern side of the DMZ. He met at the North Korean equivalent of the Peace House. The Peace House is where they had their first summit. Tongulgak in North Korea is where they had their second summit just during the overnight hours in the United States. When I left Wonsan earlier today, local time, and I spoke with North Korean officials, they were cautiously optimistic that diplomacy was back on track. We know the lines of communication between North Korea and the United States were reopened. North Koreans hadn't been returning phone calls. They were angry about comments by the vice president and by President Trump's national security advisor, John Bolton, comparing North Korea to Libya, a country that gave up its nuclear weapons only to have its government and dictator overthrown and killed by U.S.-backed forces a few years later. But it seems now that the North Koreans have decided, and their messaging to President Trump indicated, they want this dialogue to happen. They've toned down their rhetoric. And this meeting between President Moon and Kim Jong-un really is an attempt by the North and South, who want these talks to happen, to try to figure out how they can make things work with the United States and sit down face-to-face, Kim Jong-un and President Trump.
All right, Matt Rivers and Will Ripley for us this morning. Thank you both.
CNN political commentator Matt Lewis with us now, as well as CNN national security analyst Samantha Vinograd, who worked under 2 presidential administrations. Thank you both for being here. Samantha, wanted to start with you first. What do you think has to happen? How can South Korea specifically be instrumental in crafting this meeting with President Trump and Kim Jong-un and finally bringing it to fruition?
Well, Christy, it's interesting because we're all saying that this meeting between Kim Jong-un and President Moon was a surprise. I don't actually think this meeting was a surprise. It was unannounced, but I think for all of us that have been tracking these negotiations, it is unsurprising that President Moon would do whatever it takes to keep the summit on schedule, including going onto the north side of the border. President Moon has so much invested in this personally that I think that he will pull out all the stops to try to ensure that a meeting between President Trump and Kim does happen. Now, the problem is that President Moon, who is a strong ally of the United States, is not completely an unbiased middleman here. And it is entirely possible that he oversold what North Korea was willing to do back in March when we first announced this summit. So I think that President Trump welcomed him in Washington, D.C. He went there just a few days ago to try to keep negotiations on track. He now went into North Korea to achieve the same objective. But I think that this time around, if I was still in the White House, I'd be urging President Trump and Ambassador Bolton to consider everything President Moon says and to try to verify its authenticity.
Matt, let's look at the chronology here. We heard from the North Koreans demands that started to be made, where they wanted defectors back that had gone through China and then were in South Korea. They wanted some military air exercises to stop. They were spooked by the Libya model. Then the president says, all right, talks are off based on these statements you're making. And now we're getting this conciliatory tone from the North Koreans. The president said everybody plays. Did the president make a play here that seems to have worked?
I think so. I think that this is gamesmanship, and I think that if you're going to go into a negotiation, you have more leverage if people believe that you're willing to walk out of it. And I think this was just preliminary jockeying for position. I think that the North Koreans started it. Although you could argue that Bolton's comments, maybe that they started it. And then I think Donald Trump wanted to demonstrate that he's not that anxious to make a deal, right? The person who wants to make the deal worst has the least amount of leverage. This is a case, I think, where Donald Trump actually, I'm hopeful. There's a lot of areas where I've been critical of Donald Trump. And he's very unorthodox and very unpredictable. In a lot of ways, I think that's dangerous and problematic. But when it comes to dealing with someone like the North Korea leader, I think it might actually be more of a feature, not a bug.
So, Samantha, if this meeting does happen, first of all, how plausible is it that it would happen in the time frame it was first discussed on June 12th? And secondly, what does the U.S. have to walk away from that meeting with in order for it to be seen as a success?
Well, I think that based upon the president's tweets, he said that the meeting could still happen on June 12th in Singapore. So he said that less than 36 hours after an official statement of U.S. policy canceling the summit. So I'm anticipating a lot more ups and downs in terms of when and where this meeting is happening in between now and June 12th. But the problem here is that the president back in March laid out what he said the United States needed to get out of this meeting. And that was a commitment to complete and verifiable denuclearization. So he set the bar quite high publicly a few months ago. It is entirely possible that the United States could have a productive meeting with Kim Jong-un on June 12th and walk away with something less, but something still significant, like for example, allowing weapons inspectors in to monitor nuclear sites and to verify that North Korea has indeed frozen its program. So I think that the president defined what success was publicly back in March, but it's quite possible that the summit occurs and we get something less than that is still a net benefit for security in the region and around the world.
Matt, your degree of confidence that this summit happens as scheduled?
Oh, I think that it's probably more likely than not that it will happen. To me, the real question is the outcome. And I remain, cautious. We'll say cautiously optimistic. Anybody who sees these pictures and who sees the idea of these two leaders coming together, it feels good. It looks good. But at the end of the day, it's what they negotiate, what the outcome is. And it could be there's a lot of range there between the positive outcome and the potential negative outcome.
Mm-hmm. Matt Lewis and Samantha Vinograd, your perspective is certainly appreciated here. Thank you.